You are pushed forward, bare feet scraping stone, until a shape rises out of the dark like a crouched god made of metal. A bull larger than any living animal, its bronze hide cold enough to sting the air around it. The hatch in its side gapes open, just wide enough for a human body. Hands clamp your shoulders. You smell smoke already, even though no fire has been lit. Inside, the space is tighter than a coffin, ribbed with hammered seams that press into your skin. The door slams shut. The sound doesn't echo. It swallows you. Outside, someone strikes flint. One spark, then another. Then the soft, hungry crackle of kindling catching. And beneath you, the floor begins to warm slowly at first, like a lie. The device in front of us, if we can call it a device, and not a nightmare given a shape, has a name that survives like a curse, the Brazen Bull. In some versions of the story it appears in ancient Sicily, in the Greek world's violent orbit, during an era when tyrants didn't just punish bodies, they staged punishment as theater. The bull is usually linked to the city of Acragas, where power was personal, and justice could be whatever the rulers said it was. Ancient writers tell us the bull was hollow, built to hold a living person inside while a fire was lit beneath. But that isn't the detail that made the story immortal. The detail that kept it alive century after century, passed from mouth to mouth like a warning, is what happened to the screams. They didn't come out as screams. They came out as music. A system of tubes, some sources say carefully shaped pipes, ran from the chamber, through the bull's throat and into its mouth, so when a human being inside begged, shrieked, prayed, and finally broke, the sound that escaped wasn't human anymore. It was transformed, warped into something animal, something that made a crowd laugh or clap or shiver in delighted disgust. The story asks a question that still lands like a slap. If cruelty can be made entertaining, how quickly do people stop calling it cruelty at all? In the streets beyond the palace walls, the city looks ordinary enough at first. White stone, sun-baked steps, olive smoke curling from kitchens, vendors calling out prices, children darting between legs, fishermen hauling ropes that cut grooves into their palms. Life continues because life always continues, even when something monstrous is being built behind closed doors. Before we go deeper, tell me where you're watching from. And if you're into dark history like this, hit subscribe. It honestly amazes me how these old stories find people everywhere. That is the first trick of tyranny. It makes horror feel like background noise. People learn to lower their voices when they mention the ruler's name. They learn which corners are watched. They learn that a man can disappear and the market still opens tomorrow. And then, one day, word spreads that an inventor has arrived. He does not look like a villain. He looks like a craftsman. He carries sketches rolled papyrus tied with cord. He speaks with confidence, the kind that makes other men step aside. Some accounts name him Phalaris or Perillos, depending on who is telling it and in what language the story has traveled. He is a bronze worker, an artisan, a man who understands heat, metal, breath, and pressure. He understands how to make bronze sing when struck. He understands how to make it speak. When he is led into the tyrant's presence, he bows low, and his mind races not with fear, but with ambition. Because this isn't simply a city, it's a court, and courts reward spectacle. The tyrant, often identified as Phalaris in later tellings, has a reputation the way storms have reputations. People don't need to see lightning to believe it exists. They just watch what happens to anyone who stands in the open field too long. An artisan who wants favor doesn't bring a simple gift. He brings something unforgettable. So the inventor describes the bull. He describes it as art first, a bronze masterpiece, lifelike, gleaming, powerful. He describes how it can sit in a courtyard like a symbol of strength. But then he lets the second meaning slide into the room like a knife. It is also a tool for justice, a way to punish criminals, traitors, enemies, a way to make an example so complete that rebellion dies in the throat before it ever becomes a shout. And then he offers the feature that turns a punishment into a performance. He tells the tyrant that when the condemned screams, the bull will roar, not because there is an animal inside, but because the tubes will shape the sound, convert human agony into the bellow of a beast. The crowd will not hear pleading. The crowd will not hear a man calling for his mother. They will hear an angry bull, a myth made real, a noise that feels like entertainment instead of murder. The tyrant listens. The tyrant smiles. But there is a kind of smile that isn't warmth. It's appetite. It's the look of a man tasting the future. And in that moment, the inventor realizes something too late. He has not brought a gift. He has brought an idea. And once an idea like this is spoken aloud, it no longer belongs to the mouth that birthed it. It belongs to the hand that can use it. The bull is commissioned. Bronze is gathered in quantities that make people whisper. Fires are built not for cooking, not for pottery, but for smelting. The city's metal workers are pulled from ordinary work and told to help. Some do it for pay. Some do it because refusal is dangerous. Some because curiosity is a drug. What could require this much bronze? What could be so important that the tyrant himself is involved? The bull takes shape over days and weeks. First the frame, then the plates, then the seams hammered and riveted until they look like muscle. The head is sculpted with an artist's patience, eyes wide, nostrils flared, mouth open, as if caught mid-roar. A hatch is hidden along the side, designed to blend into the body so the audience sees only the animal, not the engineering of death. Inside, it is worse than cramped. It is calculated. The interior is designed to hold a person upright or curled, to maximize contact with heated metal, to deny comfort. The bronze is thick enough to hold heat, thick enough to keep the victim alive long enough to be heard. And then there are the tubes. The inventor oversees them like a musician tuning an instrument. He tests them with air, with whistles, with controlled sound. He wants the effect to be perfect, because perfection is what earns favor. The tyrant wants the effect to be perfect, because perfection is what makes fear feel like destiny. By the time the bull is finished, it is beautiful in the way weapons are beautiful. Smooth, deliberate, made to fit the human hand, or in this case, the human imagination. The day of the first demonstration arrives not with trumpets, but with the quiet urgency of rumor. People move through the city with that sideways glance that says, "Have you heard?" Some don't want to go. Some do. Curiosity is not always courage. Sometimes it's just the part of the brain that can't look away from the edge of a cliff. The tyrant's courtyard fills. The bull is placed where the sun hits it, so it gleams like a living thing. Servants polish it until reflections ripple across its flanks. A fire pit is prepared beneath, stacked with wood that looks too dry, too ready. There are guards at every entrance, not just to keep the crowd in order, but to remind everyone that leaving is also a choice the tyrant controls. And then the condemned is brought out. This is where the story becomes a human story, because without a human face, it's just myth. In different tellings, the first victim is a criminal, a traitor, a scapegoat. But imagine for a moment that he is simply a man who said the wrong thing at the wrong time. Imagine he is a scribe who copied a rumor onto paper. Imagine he is a citizen whose neighbor needed someone else to blame. He is not dressed for death. He is dressed like someone who was pulled out of life too quickly to prepare. His hair is uncombed. His wrists are tied. His eyes dart to the bull and then away, as if refusing to give the object the dignity of being real. The inventor stands nearby, proud and nervous. He watches the tyrant more than he watches the victim, because the tyrant's reaction is the only thing that matters now. In the inventor's mind, this will be a moment of triumph. This will be his doorway into power. The hatch opens. The victim hesitates, and the guards do what guards always do. They turn hesitation into movement. Hands push. The man stumbles. His shoulder hits bronze with a dull clang. He scrambles, tries to brace himself, but there is nowhere to brace inside a metal throat. He is folded into the hollow belly. The hatch closes. That sound, the heavy final thud of metal meeting metal, lands on the crowd differently than laughter or applause. It is the sound of something becoming irreversible. A guard checks the latch. The inventor watches closely. He wants everything secure. He wants no mistakes. Then flint strikes steel. One spark becomes flame. Flame becomes crackle. Crackle becomes heat. At first, the victim inside pounds on the walls. It sounds like a muffled drum beat. The bull doesn't move, but the illusion of life begins anyway, because sound makes objects feel alive. The crowd leans in. Some people fold their arms. Some cover their mouths. A few smirk, because smirking is easier than admitting fear. The wood catches fully. The fire licks upward, orange and eager. Heat climbs into the bronze. Inside, the victim begins to scream. The first scream is raw and human, but it doesn't escape raw and human. The tubes catch it like fingers catching a string. They bend it, shape it, press it through narrow passages until it comes out the bull's mouth as something else. A bellow, deep, resonant, almost convincing, almost. The crowd reacts in a wave. Some laugh, startled, because it sounds absurd. Some gasp, because it sounds too real. Some clap, not because they are evil by nature, but because the social pressure of a crowd is a kind of current, and once it starts moving, it drags people along. This is the tyrant's genius. He doesn't just punish the victim. He recruits the audience into the punishment. As the minutes pass, the screams change, not just in volume, but in quality. The human voice does strange things under unbearable pain. It breaks into pitches you don't recognize. It becomes animal, even without the tubes. It becomes breathless. It becomes frantic. It becomes a series of sounds that aren't language anymore. And each shift becomes a new note in the bull's performance. The inventor listens like a composer. He is thinking, yes, this is working. He is thinking, my tubes are perfect. He is thinking, the tyrant will reward me. But then he looks at the tyrant, and the tyrant isn't merely satisfied. He is delighted. Not delighted like a man enjoying art. Delighted like a man discovering a new way to own other people. The fire continues. The bronze turns into a cooking surface, the way a pan becomes a pan, not because of its shape, but because of what heat does to it. Inside, skin presses against metal and sticks. Sweat becomes steam. Breath becomes scarce. The air heats so rapidly it feels like swallowing flame. The victim's panic becomes physical because the body knows when it is being turned into food. And yet the bull's mouth keeps singing. Outside, the crowd begins to settle into the rhythm of it. They adjust to the sound the way people adjust to any repeated noise. That is the second trick of tyranny. Repetition makes the unthinkable feel normal. Somewhere in that courtyard, maybe a boy watches with wide eyes. Maybe a woman grips her husband's arm so hard her fingernails leave crescent moons in his skin. Maybe an old man stares at the bull's polished flank and sees his own reflection warped, like the bronze is already bending reality. And the victim inside is no longer a person to the crowd. He is an effect. The bull becomes a symbol in a single afternoon. People begin to speak of it not as a tool, but as a creature. They talk about feeding it. They talk about hearing it. They talk about it like it has a personality, because that's easier than admitting what it truly is, a machine designed to turn a human being into sound. After the demonstration, the tyrant is praised. The inventor is praised. But praise in a tyrant's court is slippery, because it's not about fairness. It's about keeping power centered where it already sits. And here the story takes its first major twist, the kind that makes the legend feel like it has teeth. Because some ancient versions say the tyrant, impressed by the bull, turns to the inventor and says essentially, "Show me. Let me hear how it sounds." And the inventor, eager to prove his craftsmanship, leans toward the bull's mouth or climbs near the hatch and demonstrates, speaking into the mechanism to show the acoustic transformation. In one telling, the tyrant orders the inventor to climb inside. "Just briefly," he says, "just to test it, just so we can hear." And the inventor, caught between pride and fear, obeys because disobeying a tyrant is like refusing gravity. The hatch opens again. The heat has cooled enough to approach, but the interior still smells wrong, metallic, burnt, sour with what the body leaves behind when it dies in panic. The inventor crawls in. The hatch shuts. The courtyard goes quiet in the way a room goes quiet when someone is about to break a glass. Flint strikes steel. The inventor inside begins to shout, not in pain at first, but in confusion, in protest, in realization. His voice funnels through the tubes and emerges as a bull's bellow perfect, rich, convincing, and then the fire is allowed to grow. Not long enough to kill him, some versions insist the tyrant had him pulled out before he died, because the tyrant wanted him alive to suffer in some other way, or because the tyrant wanted the satisfaction of knowing he could have killed him, and chose not to, like a god postponing a lightning strike. But long enough for the inventor to understand that his creation has become his cage. This is the moral contradiction spike that hits like a sudden drop in a film. The man who designed the bull to please power becomes instantly disposable to power. The tyrant doesn't need him anymore. He has the bull, he has the method, he has the fear it creates. And once fear exists, it keeps working even when you're not watching. After that day, the bull is no longer a novelty. It becomes policy. A citizen accused of treason is taken. A rival is taken. A soldier who failed is taken. A messenger who arrived too late is taken. The bull becomes the answer to problems that once required debate, evidence, restraint. It becomes the shortcut that tyrants love, replace governance with terror. But the bull doesn't just kill. It transforms the entire city's psychology. People begin to police themselves. Conversations shorten. Jokes become dangerous. Friends stop confiding in friends. A father tells his son to stop asking questions, not because questions are bad, but because questions can be overheard. A wife begs her husband not to criticize the ruler at the dinner table, because walls are thin and fear is thick. And the worst part is that everyone knows someone who heard it. Not saw it, heard it, because the bull's sound carries. Imagine walking a narrow street at night and hearing from the palace what sounds like an animal roaring a bull, deep and furious, echoing through stone. You pause, and then you remember the rumor. The roar isn't an animal at all, it's a person, and that knowledge changes how you breathe. The sound becomes an invisible border around the tyrant's power, not a wall but a reminder, and people begin to measure their lives by their distance from it, far enough to pretend, close enough to fear. Some resist quietly by hiding fugitives, refusing to celebrate, or whispering this is not normal like a prayer, while others vanish and the bull keeps roaring. This punishment isn't about efficiency. If death were the goal, there are faster ways. The bull is designed for time, to stretch death into an event and turn execution into a memory, ensuring enemies die twice, once in the body and once in the stories that spread afterward. Traders carry it, sailors whisper it, and the tale evolves as horror always does, reshaped into legend, because legend is easier to hold than reality. Yet the core remains unchanged. Bronze, fire, and screams turned into music, leaving behind a legacy that is disturbing not because it may have existed, but because it feels believable, because humans, given fear and distance, can learn to call agony art.